RBLR Nation. Hope y'all are having a good day, evening, week, whenever y'all are tuning in, whether it's live or on demand. We are RBLR Bulls. We're coming at you with some USF news, all USF athletics related. We've got you covered. We got a great show coming up. We'll talk a little bit of football because the schedule's been released and finalized. Some men's basketball because obviously they had some big time games, as well as some women's basketball, track, and then some lacrosse because it lacks his life, that type of thing. So we'll be talking about it all. But before we get into our show, I'd love to introduce my wonderful co-host, Mr. Jonathan Shields. How are you doing today, my friend?
I am fantastic. It's good to be back after a very long basketball season for myself, but USF has been holding it down since I've been gone, man. They've done a lot of really good things and some stuff that we're going to hit on, so I won't spoil it. In the last kind of 3 weeks, well, it's been the heart of my season for basketball. But yeah, it's just I'm excited because this, you don't think an episode on February 5th can be kind of as loaded potentially as this one is. But yeah, I'm excited to get right into it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It really is. There's a lot to talk about, especially with basketball. It's kind of funny your basketball season is ending, and USF's basketball season kind of right in the thick of things. So we'll get to all the basketball talk, but first I did want to address the football stuff because there's some fun things going on with the football team. It's their last season at Raymond James, so it's kind of their final send off, and to celebrate, they're having a seven game home game slate. I don't know of a better way to say that, but yeah, they're going to be finishing out the season with a lot of home games at Raymond James, so a lot of football to be watched there, a lot of college football and NFL football, of course, but that's for the Buck show. But I wanted to touch on the out of conference opponents because they're an interesting bunch, to put it one way. They're playing Florida International at home, Delaware State, that's their FCS matchup or non-Division I matchup at home. And then they head to Bowling Green on September 26th for their third game of the year. And then they get a bye week, and then they head back home for Kent State October 17th. Obviously, Kent State a couple of years ago, not this season, but the past season, 0-12. So not the most inspiring non-conference schedule, Jonathan. What were your thoughts when you saw this?
How it's just night and day from last year.
I know.
Last year you had Florida, you had Boise State, you had Miami, and it's just like Delaware State going on the road to Bowling Green, the traditional power Bowling Green. And I think, we'll get into the conference schedule. USF kind of got screwed a little bit in who they have to play on the road in terms of at home in conference this year, which is always something to kind of look at. But yeah, in terms of non-conference, man, it's just their margin for error is a lot smaller this year than it was last year. And, it is what it is. We're going to get into people they brought in last year, but USF brought in 22 Power 4 guys into their program. That's huge. Right. That's huge for a program like USF. So maybe they don't need the margin for as large as it was last year. But yeah, it's nice that they have a 7-game home schedule. But when 2 of those games are Delaware State and Kent State, I'd rather trade those 2 home games in for 1 game against a Boise State or just one of those even a better Group of 5 team. I mean, how fun would it have been if they would have played like James Madison, like go schedule a team that was in the playoff last year or was knocking on the door. And obviously American's the best non-Power 4 conference in football. But man, how fun would a James Madison, just like when they played Boise State last year, would have been. But I'm not going to qualm too much about the schedule. It is what it is. It's nice that they have the extra home game, and nice that we won't be biting our fingernails at every single game like felt like we were doing last year at a conference.
Yeah, and I do try to give because they were supposed to play Bama, in their non-conference schedule, and then Bama backed out. So I do try to give them a little bit more leeway, credence, a little bit more forgiveness for this, but it is disappointing. Absolutely, it's kind of a bummer to see the non-conference schedule be what it is because I mean, like you said, there's a very small margin for error. They have to win the American Conference, and I guess that doesn't really change whether or not, they would have had to win the American Conference to make the college football playoff regardless. But now they have to win the American Conference, and they have to be by far, they have to be the clear-cut best Group of 5 program as well. So, that kind of adds that extra layer if that's truly their goal this season, which I'm sure that's what Coach Hartline and this team want to do. But getting into the actual conference schedule, like you said, some kind of tough road games. They have to go to Army, but they go to FAU, ECU, and UTSA. Their home games are going to be against Memphis and Tulane. Those are the two really tough ones. And then Temple and University of Alabama, Birmingham. So kind of interesting. Did you have any takeaway thoughts from their actual conference schedule?
Yeah, I read it backwards at first. I thought they had to go to Memphis and Tulane. So this
Oh,
sets up
I was
way
gonna
better
say, yeah,
for them than I originally thought. Having to go to Memphis and Tulane the same year would have been really tough.
yeah,
Obviously, Memphis and Tulane also lost their coaches similar to USF, but man, that's just becomes much more favorable. Like, Army is solid. FAU hasn't been good in a few years. ECU hasn't been good in a few years. Traditionally, they're pretty good. UTSA they were above average last year. I'm pretty sure they beat Tulane, who won the conference, obviously ended up making the playoffs. So,
right.
obviously nothing easy in there, but getting Memphis and Tulane at home, the traditional quote unquote powers of the American at home,
Mhm.
is huge because you have to assume North Texas isn't going to be as good this year as they were last year. As they lose their two receivers, their running back, their quarterback, and their head coach. It's
Yeah,
just kind of the way the world works now. And you look in terms of who they brought in, uh, USF definitely had the best portal class out of the American. I mean, by
yeah.
far. I mean, the portal class would go up there with some Power 4 teams,
Mhm.
So, yeah, I think this sets up really, really, really well for them to pick up kind of where they left off last year. Obviously, with Hardline coming in, Golish heading out, to continue that momentum that Golish did have. And, I, this is something I wanted to bring up, and I think it's a credit to the AD at USF who I know left recently, but the new guy that came in and the transition has been seamless to be the two sports that matter the most are football and basketball. And baseball is third and it might be closer to second for some people, but it is what it is. For USF to be as competitive as they've been in the last 4 years in both those sports in the world that we live in now is kind of crazy, to be completely
Yeah,
honest with you. Because we just talked about North Florida, who lost their 5 best players, but they don't have the resources that USF does to come and kind of not get equal guys back, but be good enough to be, a playoff contender next year. You know what I mean?
right.
And then USF, obviously, you have the tragedy with the coach and all that stuff that I don't really want to get into because it's just so tragic. And a lot of programs could have not folded, but just taken a gargantuan step back. And
Right.
now I would argue that USF's the best team in the American basketball wise.
Wow.
So to be where they're at and the two main sports and even women's basketball as well is just a credit to how well built this athletic department is. Because again, you're going to look all over the American at just coaches leaving, rosters getting gutted. And here's USF. We're looking like, man, like they had a really good portal class, like a
Yeah,
really good portal class.
right.
And you look at the schedule and it just sets up really favorable for them. So I know that that's a little bit of a different angle, but it's something that I've been thinking of for like the last 10 days because, think about like Wichita State and how they made the Final Four and then they were a
Mhm.
1 seed.
Now
No
they're
one's heard from them since.
yeah,
Ironically, USF plays them that next week, and they're just incredibly mediocre now.
right.
And so
Yeah.
it's really hard for those mid majors to continue to be um, productive. And USF has
Yeah.
done it. And granted, it's a little bit of a smaller sample size. It's been, we're not too far away from USF not winning a game in football and going one. So again, I'm not going to throw the parade, but in this era, in the last 3.5 to 4 years that they've been this competitive is really something.
Yeah, 100%, man. Yeah, I mean, it's Rod Higgins, the technically he's the CEO now. He's not even the athletic director anymore, which, whatever. But yeah, he's done a great job of coming in and kind of providing that same uh sort of standard for USF, or even elevating that standard really. And yeah, it's really tough with all the churn both in the coaching staffs as well as the rosters with the current landscape of college sports. Yeah, it's tough. And now you got, bigger programs like Alabama and such bringing in former professional players too, that
Yeah.
still have
Oh, yeah.
eligibility left. So
That's a
that's
whole other
that's
thing.
what you got to compete with too.
You think I
Maybe
was
USF
worked up
needs to
about the
call compete.
playoff committee. You have no idea my feelings about Bediako on Alabama. Don't even get started.
Oh
But
man,
yeah,
you're
you're
not,
right.
you're not advocating for USF to pick up Cam Thomas off the waiver wire.
Oh, I mean, technically, Cam Thomas has 3 years of eligibility remaining in college, so,
Hey man,
um,
got to call his agent. Got to call
yeah,
his
he can
agent for
please
sure.
around.
Yeah, no, it's a weird one, man. It's a weird time in college sports for sure. It feels like there's got to be some changes or got to be something that gives. But yet, despite all of that tumultuous, environment, USF is still able to kind of keep pushing forward and keep doing their thing. And yeah, the football team is a big example of that. And this season is just going to be another one that has kind of an opportunity for them to get. I think their floor is at least 9 or 10 wins. Like they could potentially have a double-digit win season,
Yeah.
and like the ceiling is this college football playoff appearance. Anything short of either of those two things would be a pretty massive failure in my mind, and I'm sure in the minds of the people in charge. So we'll see. They also have a spring game on April 19th. I know that's a couple months away, but never too early. So that's kind of fun. But it's never too late also to bring in some more guys. They have another late addition via the transfer portal. That's Jalen Acevedo. He's an offensive lineman, kind of a swing guy, tackle/guard. He's coming from Navy. He started multiple games as a redshirt freshman and sophomore. 6'5", 310, local guy from Orlando, still has 3 years of eligibility left. Could compete for a starting spot. He definitely just another big body, another guy that the USF can bring in and sort of, push their current starters or push the guys that they have in mind to start, as well as provide some depth. So that was an exciting thing. So moving on to the men's basketball team, though, because they played 3 games since we last spoke on this show. We'll start chronologically. We'll go to the Tulane game first, because that was a big one. They won by 14 points, 97-83. They had some really big time performances really across the board from their starters. Were there any guys that you really wanted to hone in on that came out of that USF Tulane game from last week?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a lot of the same guys that we've been mentioning. Wes Ennis has had a fantastic year,
For
and
sure.
obviously he was great in that game. But anytime you get a guy averaging over 15 points per game in his first year of playing, I won't say obviously USF's not high major, but playing big time Division I basketball is big. He's shooting 36% from three, which again it is great. And he's been on a really nice little stretch here lately. Obviously he had the 25 against Tulane. He had 16 against UTSA. He had 17 against Temple in the loss, a tough loss. And we talk about USF, and I kind of said I think that they might be the best team in the American. And their 3 losses this year have been in overtime, versus Temple, not in overtime, versus Temple by 1 point, versus Wichita State at home by 1 point, and UAB by 3. So they're about 5 possessions away from being undefeated in the American. But in terms of, it's crazy to think about. But in terms of guys that solely stood out against Tulane, definitely Wes Ennis is a guy that stood out. And then, when you get 5 guys in double figures like they did, you're going to win a lot of basketball games if you get 5 guys in double figures, especially when leading scorer has 25 and shoots 50% from 3. But yeah, that definitely Wes Ennis has been a nice little role over these last 4 or 5 games.
Yeah, man. Yeah, they really crushed it against Tulane. Like they just really across the board, like you said, it was really a group effort, as it has been for most of their victories. When they got the usual Isaiah Nelson double. Joseph Pinion contributed 17 points. He was lighting it up from deep and also shot 50% from the field. That's really nice. CJ Brown, he's just kind of the steady Eddie. One of their better players is the playmaker, kind of the floor general type of guy. And Tulane's had a bit of a struggling season, so you don't want to necessarily take too much from this game, but still a nice victory to have. And like you mentioned, they took a 1-point loss to Temple. And then their next matchup, Isaiah Nelson still had a great game, 18 points, 8 rebounds, and Wes Ennis had 17 points. Joseph Pinion had 16 points. You look at all those performances, and CJ Brown, 11.6 assists, and you think, man, like, how did they lose this game? And it's ball security. They coughed it up 18 times. And that's kind of been a trend really for women's basketball too. We'll get into that as well. But yeah, man, just a last second lapse, just another kind of brain fart at the end of the game. It happened against Wichita State unfortunately with Wes Ennis. This time it was defensively. They couldn't get a final stop after a Nelson go-ahead dunk with 22 seconds left. So it's brutal, man. I don't know what to make of USF's struggles to close it, because I know you're obviously the former college basketball player. So what goes into like failing to execute at the end of games? Like, can you kind of blame it on, well, that's just the way the ball bounces, or is it execution? Like, what can USF do to kind of right this ship in terms of end of game situations?
You got to practice it. You got to put yourselves in that situation as many times as possible. So we would play simulated games when we were in college. So when I was in college, so we would have a team. So the starting group would be on one side, the next 5 would be on other. It'd be like, okay, bench group is up by 4 with 2 minutes left. and we play out those last 2 minutes because there's a million situations that go in. So we were a school that fouled when we were winning by 3, fouling up 3, put them to the line, and so on and so forth.
Right.
So obviously that wasn't the case in the Temple game, but you
Mhm.
work on, okay, we just scored a bucket. We're up 1, and there's 10 seconds left. We need to make sure that we are matched up. We need to make sure that we have great communication, and we need to make sure we know what we're doing. A lot of times, those last 10 seconds, we would call it red, where we'd switch everything. And that just kind of eases the situation of, okay, we're not communicating. We forgot to do the switch. Someone gets a wide open layup, So that's just how we played it. And we were really good in late clock and late game in a lot of those situations. So I know USF practices it because honestly,
Of
if you're a
course.
Division I team, you're not practicing it that way, then
Right.
it's a failure.
Yeah.
So I know that they're doing it in some capacity, but nothing compete. You can practice all you want, but if it can't go the live game, it doesn't go the live game because
Right.
the guy that you're guarding. So let's say, we've talked about Wes Ennis, so I'll pick on him since I said a lot of good things about him, and obviously, he's been really good. But again, it's like an example. Let's say Wes Ennis is being guarded by the 9th best guy on USF's team, right? In these late game situations when they practice
Right.
it. Okay, now you go to Temple and he's being guarded by the best perimeter defender.
Mhm.
And again, I'm not saying he was. It's just an example. Or let's say Wichita State when they play again next whenever they play. So that's just that talent. That's a 3, 4, 5% jump in talent right there that you don't really practice against in that situation. So, they definitely practice it, and hopefully because of what has happened recently. Because look, when you lose, you're only 3 games in the in conference by the amount that we've talked about.
Right.
It's not, I say if two, if it happens twice, it's a coincidence. It happens more than that. It's kind of a trend, especially since in conference they haven't really won any close games. They've all been by a pretty comfortable margin. So,
Right.
it's definitely something that has to just be repped. Has to be repped over and over and over again. It's got to be drilled into your mind. It's like, okay, do we have timeouts? A lot of times when after we'd score with 10 seconds left, again, this is another thing that is discussed is like, do you call a timeout if you were the team that scored to give them the opportunity to drop a play so you can set your defense and you can limit those communicative mistakes that can happen. So a million things go into it, but it's definitely something they got to shore up because, like I said, they're 5 possessions away from being undefeated in the American and being
Mhm.
talked about as like an 11 seed in March Madness. And
Yeah.
instead, it's obviously they're nowhere near the bubble, but they should be in the running to win an American conference or regular season championship. And
Yeah.
obviously they still have a lot of conference games ahead of them, but yeah, you look at those as missed opportunities for sure.
Yeah, 100%, man. I mean, I think you said this like at the beginning of their conference schedule, like a loss feels like 2 losses,
Yeah.
like 2 non-conference losses. And especially a loss like this, like the games that they've managed to let slip away. They've felt tough, they've felt rough. But luckily, they've also had some excellent performances. Like they took down FAU, who's kind of in their
Yeah.
competition for the regular season American Conference trophy or whatever they call it. So they've had some good wins, but like you said, the most of their wins, if not all, like you said, I don't think they've won a close game. So it's been kind of a frustrating thing. It's been a very frustrating thing to watch for sure. So we'll see if they can kind of buck that trend or if they can work on kind of getting their stuff together. Because man, it's never an effort thing with them. Like they
No.
always out rebound everyone. They always
Yeah.
get to the free throw line. They're always hustling. Like it's never been like a question of like, do they want it more? It's like
Yeah.
not a coaching thing. It's just a man, like they just can't seem to get that done at the end of games. So
And Tulsa is
hopefully
their biggest competition, and they played Tulsa. No, I won't say biggest competition, but they're number 1 in the conference this year in kind of regular season. So that's the next game is a huge, huge, huge game.
yeah.
And to your point about the late clock stuff or the late game stuff, I won't say number 1 stat, but a huge, huge stat that my college coaches looked at is assist to turnover ratio. So
Mm,
you look at USF's backcourt, Joseph Pinion is 49 assists to 31 turnovers. That's like 1-to-1. That's not great, right? But we had guys in college that were negative in that department. So it is what it is. CJ Brown has probably been the best, their best assist guy this year. He's 122 to 53. Again, you're in that 2-to-1 category. That's good. It's not elite. It's good. It'll win you games. And then you go to Wes Ennis, who's definitely more of an off the ball guard, but and he is at 44 assists to 32 turnovers. Again, that's not great. For example, I was looking at Boogie Flam for Florida the other day. he's at like 130 to 32. You know what I mean? Like that
Right.
kind of jump. It's not quite that drastic, but it's in that ballpark.
Mhm.
So yeah, that not again, especially the West End is one again. He's more of an off-ball guy, not playmaking. CJ Brown, he's their best playmaker. But again, turnovers is what lose you games. And it's lost them, like you said, what, 2 games this year, kind of late in the game. So they're
Yeah.
too talented um to let games slip away like that. But you beat Tulsa on, I think they play Tuesday, and all of a sudden you're first place in the American, and you'll be able to hang a banner if you win the regular season in the American.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, man. Yeah, and I think they actually play Tulsa Sunday. It's
Oh,
a
Sunday.
salute to service game, but it's at home. So, if you're in the area, definitely show out
Get
because
out there to
that's gonna
the
be that's gonna be huge, man. That's gonna be huge. There's kind of a lot riding on that game for sure. Like you said, it's Tulsa, FAU, and USF. They're kind of the top three. And FAU's kind of fallen off actually, not that I'm looking at it, but at the time they played each other in conference, but regardless, Tulsa and USF, they're definitely kind of the top two right now. And USF did play UTSA Wednesday night. They had a big time W, 109 to 88. Not really a whole lot to say there because UTSA, they're winless in conference play. That was very much a gimme game. If they would have lost that game, or if they even would have won, but in a narrow fashion, that probably would have been a little concerning, to be quite honest. But Isaiah Nelson, he had a monster game, 25 points. Ennis Brown and Pinion, they also had solid contributions. But the big story for me was freshman guard Gavin Hightower. He came off the bench with 21 points. How many of those points were garbage time minutes? Because towards the end of the game, it's a blowout like that. Maybe he gets a little bit more of an opportunity than he usually does. But regardless, it's excellent to see a guy like that perform well against a D1 competition because UTSA, they might be having a rough season, but they're still a D1 school, still respect to have. Also, senior guard Devin Hade had 9 rebounds off the bench. Really fun. They just dominated across the board. Like rebounds, they were up in the turnover battle. They took care of the basketball, and sure enough, they win by 21. So go figure. They also had 25 assists compared to UTSA's 11. So they were really spreading the ball around really well. But getting into the Tulsa game, I really wanted to touch on Tulsa because, like we've been saying, that's probably going to be the biggest game of the year, or at least one of the biggest games of the year. Key player to watch for them, David Green. He's their leading scorer and leading rebounder, 6'7" senior forward. He's out of Apopka, Florida, too, so a bit of a homecoming game for him. So we'll see how USF is able to contain Tulsa. They've been really good this year. It's really Green, Miles Barnsdale, sorry, senior guard. He's pretty good, too. And then Tylen Riley, they call him T. Riley. He's really good as well. They're all 3 of those guys are their top 3 scorers. So those are kind of the 3 main guys to watch for in this Tulsa game. So we'll see how it goes. Do you have any thoughts on like whenever you had like a big time opponent, like you knew you had to play up, like what goes into preparing for one of these types of games?
Yeah, I mean, you just got to be locked in the scout. So another little tidbit. I mean, this is pretty well known, but before every game, you get a packet. Basically, it's a scouting report, and you'll have the starting 5 listed. You'll have their 4 bench players listed. It says their tendencies. It says if they're a shooter, we would call them. They'd have to be a Curry closeout. You know what I mean? Because Steph Curry, Curry closeout. So
There you go.
yeah, so it's just different ways. It's like if they were bad on defense, slow on defense, you say that they're an elephant. That you have to attack them. So in games like this, you can get away with that against UTSA and not really kind of know what's going on. You need to know that. You need to know that Tylen Riley shoots 50% from the field. That's no joke. That they have 4 guys shooting right at 40% from 3. I mean, that's huge, and that's not like 2 out of 5. That's 44 out of 110. Like that's a huge sample size. That's kind of the definition of a Curry closeout.
Right.
So you got to not let them get clean catch and shoots, and everyone's defense is different. It's like, there's different ways, obviously, for Tulsa to get their shooters open looks, but you just have to be more dialed in on the little stuff in games like this because in a mistake, if you let against a team like UTSA, you let a guy get a clean look who shoots 40% from 3, and it's like, oh, whoops, he made it. Against Tulsa, a team that you need to beat in order to get to where you want to get to, it's one of those. It's like, you have 2 or 3 breakdowns. Obviously, all of a sudden you lose by 2 points. The margin of error is just way, 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 way tinier. So, it's a little things like that are maybe you don't think of if you're like an average fan. Let me flip on a USF game, but I know those coaches are drilling home these things
Right.
about the tendencies of the Tulsa players, their sets. So you have a whole scout team in practice that runs their sets, and you have to guard them, so you're familiar with their what they like to run the most, and you just got to be extra locked in for those because again, like I said, the mistakes are magnified in a game like that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And unfortunately, USF kind of has been making a lot of them recently. Those turnovers will kill them. So, if they can really if they win the turnover battle, like I hate to be so reductionist and that's such a like cliche thing, but it's one of those things. Like if they take care of the basketball and if they win that portion of the game, it's going to be tough to beat them. They're a tough team to beat when they take care of the basketball and they do their thing because they'll shoot the lights out. They've got some 3-point shooters. They can space the floor. They get to the line a lot. They play hard. They're always on the boards. Isaiah Nelson, one of the best rebounders in the American Conference. He's really elite. So, they've got so much talent. Like you said, Jonathan, they're too good to not be at least competing in this Tulsa game. And I think this will be a great game. I'm really excited. I'll be there Sunday. So we'll see how it goes. But shifting our focus to the women's team, they had a victory versus Charlotte, which was really nice. They took a 67-61 win. So really, really impressive to see there. That was, it's a quality win against a solid American Conference opponent. I know Charlotte in the football world, not great, but women's basketball a little bit different. Like Rice is the best team in the American Conference for women's basketball. So, it's a very different environment in terms of which teams are good, which teams are bad. But the most recent game and the biggest game, unfortunately, was a loss last night against Eastern Carolina. They are second in the American Conference. So again, a little bit different than football. They're a tough team, and USF played them hard. It was a 64-62 loss. They played it close, but man, they just got absolutely smoked in the fourth quarter. They got outscored by 11 points in that last period. But Maputo had her usual double 17 and 13. She's sort of their Isaiah Nelson, if you will. But man, they looked sloppy throughout the game, and it really showed in the fourth quarter. They had a 22-9 turnover disadvantage, like just really, really awful basketball. So how do you rebound from that? You're playing a big time school. Like the women's team kind of just had their Tulsa game and they unfortunately didn't live up to it. So how do you kind of rebound, try to get back on your feet and finish out the season strong if you're the women's team?
Yeah, and that's a tough game because if you win that game for the women's team, you're right there in kind of the
Yeah,
regular season race, So I
it
mean,
wasn't building. Yeah,
it's a gut punch, but you can't let it be a kind of a 2-game loss, if that makes sense. You can't let this game. I hear that a lot in the NFL. It's like, okay, this can't be a 2-week loss. So, for example, when the Bucks lose to the Patriots, in that game where I thought they really controlled a lot of the pace of that game, that can't be a 2-week loss to where they go out to LA and they were flat, and ironically they were. So, this can't be a 2-game loss for USF. So, it starts really internally with the leadership on the team. You got to have people that get your team back locked in, right, to what the goals are, because like you mentioned, Tulane is a game where they should win, if we're being honest. Again,
yeah.
Tulane's 3-6 in the American. This is at home. Like USF should win this game 99 times out of 100. So this needs to be a game where they come out and take care of business and just kind of get things back on track.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Tulane definitely very much a get back game after they failed to steal kind of a big resume win. Um, so we'll see. They've still got too much talent because Carla Brito. Oh man, you just mentioned the assist to turnover ratio. She had 6 assists, 6 turnovers. So it's like one of those things where she had a great game passing the ball, but she also, in some aspects, had an awful game passing the ball. And I know that ECU averaging 10.3 steals per game going into that game. So it's a tough matchup in that regard. But man, they really failed to kind of rise to the occasion. Unfortunately, couldn't get the job done. But that's still a talented team. They've got a really good shot at still continuing momentum. They're in solid contention in the middle of the American Conference. I think that brought them to 13-10 overall and 6-4 in their conference. So that's certainly not a bad look at all. But March Madness at this point, it's looking slim unless they manage to
They got to win
finish
this
strong in American Conference play and win the tournament for that auto bid. So every remaining game is pretty important. So we'll see. But any closing thoughts on women's or men's basketball for USF before we move on to track?
No, we just have big games coming up, and both of them were more so in the women's word. They just got to take care of business. They like I don't think they'll get in with an at-large bid to March Madness, so you gotta make sure you're playing your best ball in the next 5 weeks, so,
Right.
definitely need to get that started, and then, look, USF men's, they beat Tulsa Sunday. I really do think they're in the driver's seat to win the American, and
Yeah.
what an accomplishment that would be after
Oh
what's
yeah.
been a chaotic, 24 months for the program.
100%.
So, yeah, I mean, that just a potential to do something huge if you're USF coming up on Sunday, like you mentioned. And yeah, I mean, once again, I'm pretty sure they only play Tulsa once. They do. So once again, you win this game, you have the tiebreaker, and again, you're really in the driver's seat. Whoever wins this game is in the driver's seat to win the American.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I think they've got as good a shot as any team really to keep up with Tulsa. I mean, they're the two best teams in the conference for a reason. So that's going to be a huge game on Sunday, Sunday afternoon, and it should be a really really fun watch. Those are two really high quality men's basketball teams, and it's the American Conference. I know people aren't, it's not the ACC or the SEC or whatever, but there's still some really quality basketball being
Oh,
played
yeah.
in that conference for men's and women. So I'm really excited to see how this season close out. But moving our attention to the track team, the women's team, they had a meet. They had a PNC Lenny Lyles meet, and they had some really, really excellent finishes. They finished third in the 4x400. Doris Quainu, my apologies, she finished fourth in the 60-meter finals. They also went to the Legends of Alachua, and Delaney Stevens finished second in the mile. That was a really impressive performance. Sticking with the Legends tournament, Ella Dulce and Madeline Dutch, they both tied for second in the pole vault, which is really fun stuff. And then the triple jump, Zion Rowe and Nisha King were sixth and seventh. That's shifting back to the PNC Lenny Lyles. So that was the women's meet. The men's bracket of that was really, really impressive as well. Kelsey Singleton was second in the 400-meter A division. Isaac Chandra was fifth in the 60-meter finals. That's also PNC Lenny Lyles. So they had some really excellent performances from the women's and men's track teams. So that's going to be something to watch moving forward as they continue their track season. The men's tennis team kind of had a rough trip to Santa Barbara. They dropped that one 5-2, so now they're 1-4 on the season. Not really a great look for them. So it's not great. Hugo Carr and James Duden, that's kind of their two main guys in that regard. And they were locked in a 4-5 battle at the number one's double tournament, but then it went unfinished. So it was just tough. It was tough. And Hugo Carr got handled at the number one spot. It was a tough tournament for them in terms of men's tennis. And then to finish it off, the lacrosse team, the women's lacrosse preseason coaches poll, USF to finish second in the American Conference, just behind JMU. So that's really fun. They've also got some really fun players that we'll get into next week more in depth. Mr. Musab Tariq did a great job of putting some information together, and I want to give him the chance to really let that thing shine. So we'll talk a little bit more about the rest of the sports as well. But we're nearing the end of our episode. Really appreciate you all for tuning in. We'll tune back in next week, regardless of whether the men's team loses or wins to Tulsa, or whether the women's team takes down Tulane. We'll be here to break it down and talk about it, as well as everything else USF athletics related. Thank you to my wonderful co-host, Mr. Jonathan Shields, for making my job incredibly easy. Hit that like and subscribe button on the way out. You can keep up with the Bulls. But until then, and as always, go Bulls.
Go Bulls, baby.
Thank you for tuning into this presentation by RBLR Sports. On your way out of the stadium, please remember to like and subscribe.